Ah, greetings, esteemed members of the Galactic Historical Society. I am Professor Xylax Brighteye, and today I shall share with you the most extraordinary tale that changed not only my perspective, but the entire foundation of our prestigious Galactic Academy of Flight. What nonsense, that was my first reaction when I heard about a human applicant to our academy. Can you believe it? Ha, a human? At our sacred institution? Let me paint you a picture of our academy, shall I? For 10,000 cycles, the Galactic Academy of Flight has stood as the pinnacle of piloting excellence in all known space. Our crystalline spires pierce the purple clouds of Nexus Prime, reaching towards the 3 moons that dance eternally in our sky. Our hangars house the most advanced vessels ever created, each worth more than the combined GDP of several developing planets. We have standards I would often proclaim during faculty meetings, my phosphorescent antennae glowing with pride. Standards that have produced the finest pilots in the galaxy for millennia. Oh, how I love to remind everyone about our illustrious history. The great Admiral Vandrax graduated from these halls. So did the legendary Scout Commander Prylax Starbringer. Even the current Galactic President, Supreme Pilot Nixus Voidweaver, once walked these hallowed corridors. Perfection takes time, I would say, my scales shimmering with satisfaction. It takes the right genetic makeup, the proper evolutionary advantages, and most importantly, the right species. You see, in all our recorded history, we had never admitted a being from a gravity world higher than 0.8 standard units. Our ships, our training, our very methodology was designed for species who evolved in low-gravity environments. We valued grace, precision, and the ability to think in 12 dimensions simultaneously. Humans? Laughs heartily, they came from a brutal gravity well of 1 standard unit. Their reaction times were considered sluggish by our standards, their spatial awareness limited to mere 3 dimensions, and their technology makes a dismissive clicking sound barely out of their planetary cradle. They should stick to their primitive rocket ships, I remember telling my colleague, Professor Lumina Brightscale, during one of our strategy sessions. Let them play with their toys while we master the true art of spaceflight. Oh, the irony. If only I could go back and shake some sense into my younger self. But that's getting ahead of our story, isn't it? Chuckles warmly. The Academy itself was a marvel of bioengineering and quantum architecture. Our training simulators could recreate any scenario in the known universe with perfect accuracy. Our theoretical physics department had collectively won 37 Galactic Nobel Prizes. We even had a cafeteria that could synthesize food from any world in the Confederacy. This is where legends are born, I would tell each new class of students. This is where the galaxy's finest pilots earn their wings. Little did I know that our most legendary pilot would come from the most unexpected place. I remember the day Marcus Phoenix arrived as clearly as a quantum crystal. There he stood, a tiny figure at the bottom of our grand entrance stairs, looking up at our towering spires with those peculiar human eyes. He wore what humans call a leather jacket, how charmingly primitive, and carried a beaten-up duffel bag that had seen better days. Professor Brighteye, my assistant, Junior Administrator Quicks, burst into my office, their bioluminescent spots flashing in distress. There's a human at the front gate. What, I nearly spilled my morning nectar. Surely you're joking. No, sir. And their spots turned a deep shade of embarrassment. He claims to be 14 Earth cycles old. I couldn't help but laugh. 14? 14? That's barely old enough to be considered sentient by galactic standards. But curiosity got the better of me. I had to see this absurdity for myself. As I glided down to the entrance hall, a crowd had already gathered. Students from across the galaxy, crystalline Andromedans, gaseous nebulons, even a pair of quantum-shifted voidborn, all gawking at our unexpected visitor. Welcome to the Galactic Academy of Flight, I announced, trying to keep the amusement from my voice. I am Professor Xylax Brighteye, Dean of Admissions. The boy looked up at me way up, given that I stand 4 meters tall in my natural form, and smiled. Not a nervous smile, mind you. No, this was the kind of smile that suggested he knew something we didn't. Sir, he said, his voice steady despite the artificial atmosphere he was breathing. My name is Marcus Phoenix. I'm here to become a pilot. Several of our students burst into laughter. Even the normally stoic Voidborn emitted amused quantum fluctuations. I raised my primary appendage for silence. Young human, I began. Using my most patronizing tone, our youngest student is 75 galactic cycles old. Our ships are designed for beings with natural spatial temporal awareness. Our training programs require processing 12-dimensional calculations simultaneously. Marcus pulled out a datapad, an ancient Earth model that made our quantum computers look like they were from the future, which technically they were. According to the Galactic Educational Rights Treaty of 3157, Section 47B, Paragraph 12, age discrimination based on species relative development is prohibited in all Confederate institutions. The crowd fell silent. Even I felt my scales flutter in surprise. He had done his homework. Furthermore, he continued, those determined human eyes locked onto mine, Earth's signatory status grants us equal consideration for all Confederate educational opportunities. But Junior Administrator Quick sputtered, their spots now cycling through confusion patterns. The physical requirements alone. I've brought my test scores, Marcus interrupted, pulling up more data, including simulator results from Earth Space Academy. I can handle 12G acceleration without a pressure suit. I've completed the Martian obstacle course in record time, and I've memorized the entire Confederate Navigation Codex in original Andromedan. I felt a headache coming on. This was unprecedented, unwanted, completely against tradition, and yet, young man, I said, drawing myself up to my full height, while your enthusiasm is noted, the Galactic Academy of Flight has maintained its standards for 10,000 cycles. We cannot make exceptions based on primitive legal technicalities. That smile again. That knowing smile that would haunt my dreams for cycles to come. Then perhaps Marcus said, pulling one final document from his jacket, you'd be interested in Statute 359 of the Academy's original charter? The one about the right of challenge. The gathered crowd gasped. Even I felt my phosphorescent antennae dim in shock. No one had invoked the right of challenge in over 2,000 cycles. No one would dare. Professor Junior Administrator Quicks whispered, their spots now showing pure panic. He's right. The statute is still valid. I looked down at this audacious human child, this Marcus Phoenix, who had just thrown 10,000 cycles of tradition into chaos with a single sentence. And for the first time in my long career, I, Professor Xylax Brighteye, was completely speechless. The next few hours were absolute chaos in the Academy's Great Hall. The ancient statute that Marcus Phoenix had discovered was projected on the quantum screens while our legal experts argued themselves into quantum knots. The right of challenge hasn't been invoked since the Great Nebula War, Professor Lumina Brightscale exclaimed, her crystalline form vibrating with excitement. Do you know what this means? It means, I grumbled, scanning the archaic text for the 100th time, that our prestigious institution might be forced to admit a human child because of some forgotten legal loophole. The statute was frustratingly clear. Any candidate rejected from the Academy could challenge the decision through 3 trials of skill, courage, and wisdom. The challenges would be set by the current Academy champion, which, unfortunately, happened to be yours truly. Come now, Xylax, Lumina chimed, her crystal facets gleaming with amusement. Surely you're not worried about a human child beating your challenges. I shot her a look that would have frozen a solar flare. Of course not. But think of the precedent. Next thing you know, we'll have Earthlings running around everywhere, touching our quantum drives with their sticky fingers. Meanwhile, Marcus sat calmly in the waiting area, reading something on his antiquated datapad. How dare he look so composed while throwing our entire institution into upheaval? The Board of Governors convened an emergency session. 27 of the most distinguished beings in the galaxy, arguing about a 14-year-old human. The irony was not lost on me. The statute is binding, announced High Governor Zephyr Starweaver, their energy form flickering with resignation. We must honor the challenge. But the equipment, I protested. Our simulators are calibrated for non-human neural patterns. Our ships are designed for beings with natural void adaptation. He'll be killed in the first trial. Marcus stepped forward, that insufferable smile still on his face. According to subsection 47 of the statute, I'm allowed to use my own equipment if the Academy's proves incompatible with my biology. The room fell silent again. This child had not only found the ancient law but had memorized every subsection. You can't possibly have a ship that matches our standards, I scoffed. No, Marcus agreed, but I have something better. I have my grandfather's modified TX-9000 simulator pod. It's compatible with your quantum interfaces but designed for human pilots. More murmuring from the board. The TX-9000 was a legendary piece of equipment created during the brief period when humans and the Confederacy attempted collaboration. Only 5 were ever made. A very well High Governor Starweaver declared. The challenge is accepted. Professor Brighteye, as Academy champion, you will set 3 trials. They must be fair but must also uphold our standards. I straightened to my full height, my scales gleaming with determination. The first trial will test spatial awareness through the Andromeda maze. The second will challenge combat skills in the void arena. And the final trial, I paused for dramatic effect, will be the legendary Omega simulation. Gasps echoed through the hall. No student had survived the Omega simulation in over 500 cycles. Even I had only completed it once, and that was after 30 years of training. I accept, Marcus said simply, extending his hand in that peculiar human gesture of agreement. The trials begin at dawn tomorrow, I announced, ignoring his hand. I suggest you spend tonight getting your affairs in order, young human. Tomorrow, you'll learn why some standards exist for a reason. As the crowd dispersed, I caught Marcus looking out at the 3 moons of Nexus Prime. For just a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not fear, not arrogance, but something else. Something that made my scales tingle with an unfamiliar sensation. Was it anticipation? Or had this clever human child seen something in our ancient laws that we had all missed? Dawn couldn't come soon enough. Before I tell you what happened next, you should know that I had spies. Of course I had spies. What self-respecting academy dean wouldn't keep tabs on a human threatening to upend 10,000 cycles of tradition? Professor Junior Administrator Quicks burst into my office at midnight, their spots flashing in confusion. The human. He's not in his assigned quarters. What I straightened all 4 of my spinal ridges. Where is he? He's in the abandoned simulator Bay 13 with Admiral Vandrax Stormchaser. I nearly choked on my evening nectar. Admiral Stormchaser? The reclusive legend who had disappeared from public life 50 cycles ago? The pilot who had written half our training manuals before vanishing into self-imposed exile? Through my spies, I learned what transpired that night and every night leading up to the trials. Picture this: an ancient, decrepit simulator bay, illuminated by emergency quantum lights. Inside, a 14-year-old human boy and a 9-limbed void navigator hunched over holographic star charts. Your kind has an advantage you haven't even realized, Stormchaser's gravelly voice echoed through the bay. Your disadvantage is your gift. Marcus looked puzzled. Our primitive evolution. The Admiral's tentacles waved in what my spies recognized as amusement. Humans evolved on a planet with only 3 spatial dimensions. You developed reflexes based on split-second survival decisions. While we process 12 dimensions, you react. The training sessions that followed were unlike anything in Academy history. Stormchaser had Marcus running physical obstacle courses while solving quantum equations. The boy would pilot basic simulations while the Admiral threw actual objects at his head. Stop thinking, Stormchaser would shout. Your species survived by acting. Your instincts are your strength. One of my spies reported a particularly interesting exchange. Admiral, Marcus asked, dripping with sweat from another bizarre exercise, "Why are you helping me?" Stormchaser's bioluminescent patches dimmed. Because 50 cycles ago, I voted against allowing humans into the Academy. I was wrong. The Confederacy fears what it doesn't understand, and we don't understand you humans at all. Through my surveillance feeds, I watched Marcus fail and fail and fail again. But something strange happened with each failure. He got faster, more precise, less bound by traditional pilot protocols. Remarkable, Professor Lumina Brightscale noted, reviewing the footage. He's not learning our methods. He's creating his own. The night before the trials, my best spy recorded their final conversation. Remember, Stormchaser's voice was soft now, almost parental. They expect you to fly like them. But you're not them. You're human. Your species went from primitive combustion engines to crude spaceships in less than 200 years. You did it because you don't know what's impossible. Marcus nodded, his hands running over his grandfather's TX-9000 simulator pod. We don't overthink. We just do. Exactly. Now, one last thing. Stormchaser extended a ceremonial tentacle. Your grandfather. He wouldn't happen to be Jack Phoenix, would he? The boy's eyes widened. You knew him. The Admiral's bioluminescence brightened. Knew him? Who do you think helped him modify that TX-9000? When I received this report, I felt my scales tingle with unease. What else didn't we know about this human child? And why did I have the unsettling feeling that tomorrow's trials wouldn't go according to plan? Little did I know Marcus Phoenix was about to show us exactly what human instincts could do. Dawn broke over Nexus Prime with all 3 moons aligned. A perfect day for crushing human dreams, or so I thought. The entire Academy had gathered in the Grand Observatory to witness the trials. Even the quantum-shifted Voidborn students, who rarely showed interest in physical events, had materialized to watch. First trial. The Andromeda Maze, I announced, my voice echoing through the chamber. A test of spatial awareness and navigation. Marcus stood before his grandfather's TX-9000, looking impossibly small. The simulator pod had been integrated into our quantum systems, its ancient metal contrasting sharply with our crystalline technology. The maze reconfigures itself 12 times per second across 15 dimensions, I explained, not bothering to hide my smirk. The current record is 37 minutes, held by yours truly. Marcus nodded, cracked his knuckles a horrifyingly primitive gesture, and entered the pod. The neural interface connected, and the trial began. What happened next still makes my scales ripple with disbelief. Instead of carefully calculating each dimensional shift like a proper pilot, Marcus, well, he just flew. He responded to each maze reconfiguration before our quantum computers had finished rendering them. While we processed possibilities, he simply reacted. Impossible, Professor Lumina Brightscale exclaimed. He's not even checking the dimensional variations. Because he's not thinking 12-dimensionally. Admiral Stormchaser's voice boomed from the back of the room. He's treating it like a simple video game. 8 minutes and 43 seconds. That's all it took. The previous record, my record, had been shattered by a child treating our most advanced training system like some primitive entertainment device. Second trial, I announced, perhaps a bit too loudly. The Void Arena. The Void Arena was my personal favorite. A combat simulation where pilots faced off against historical space battles, their decisions affecting the outcome of legendary confrontations. Your scenario, I declared, will be the Battle of Proxima Centauri, where a single Confederate squadron faced 300 Drachnid warships. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow, took a swig of water, how inefficient, requiring liquid refreshment so frequently, and re-entered the pod. The battle began, and once again, Marcus Phoenix defied everything we knew about piloting. Instead of following Confederate battle doctrine, he started doing barrel rolls. Yes, you heard me correctly. Barrel rolls. In a quantum-shifted battle cruiser. What in the name of the void is he doing? Junior Administrator Quix's spots were practically strobing. But it worked. Somehow, his completely unorthodox maneuvers confused the Drachnid targeting systems. He turned their rigid attack patterns against them, using their own quantum torpedoes to create a chain reaction that, well, let's just say he reduced the enemy fleet to quantum dust in record time. Those moves, Admiral Stormchaser chuckled. Pure human space combat games. They've been training their reflexes through entertainment for generations. By now, the crowd was buzzing with excitement. Even some of the board members were showing signs of actually being impressed. But I still had one trial left, my secret weapon. Final trial, my voice cracked slightly. How embarrassing. The Omega simulation. The room fell silent. The Omega simulation was legendary, a test so difficult that it ended many promising careers. It combined everything: combat, navigation, rescue operations, quantum mechanics, and temporal paradox resolution. No pressure, kid, I heard Admiral Stormchaser mutter, but no one survived this one in 5 centuries. Marcus looked at the ancient admiral, then at his grandfather's pod, and smiled that insufferable smile again. Good thing I don't know that's impossible, right? The simulation began. Standard procedure was to carefully assess the situation, calculate quantum probabilities, and form a comprehensive strategy. Marcus Phoenix, this audacious human child, took one look at the scenario and went full speed ahead. He's going to get himself killed. Professor Brightscale covered her crystal facets in horror. But that's when we all witnessed something extraordinary. Marcus started combining maneuvers we'd never even considered possible. He used temporal paradoxes to create his own shortcuts. He transformed quantum anomalies into makeshift weapons. He even managed to rescue the simulated civilians while simultaneously engaging in combat. "That's not in any training manual," Junior Administrator Quicks exclaimed. No, Admiral Stormchaser beamed proudly. "That's pure human instinct, combined with decades of their entertainment programming. They've been practicing these moves in games since before they had space flight." When the final scores appeared, the entire observatory erupted in chaos. Not only had Marcus Phoenix survived the Omega simulation, but he had also achieved the highest score in the history of the Galactic Academy of Flight. I stared at the results, my antennae drooping in shock. This human child had just rewritten everything we thought we knew about piloting, and he did it all while treating our most advanced training systems like they were some sort of game. The worst part? He made it look fun. Now, you might think that passing all 3 trials would be enough. Ha! Wipes bioluminescent tear of amusement. You clearly don't know how stubborn we academic types can be. There must be a final test, High Governor Starweaver announced. Something to prove beyond any doubt that this human truly deserves a place in our hallowed halls. I seized my chance. Yes, a direct challenge. The candidate versus the Academy champion. The crowd roared their approval. Marcus Phoenix looked at me, then at Admiral Stormchaser, then back at me, that smile never leaving his face. "What are the stakes, Professor?" he asked, running his hand along his grandfather's simulator pod. "Simple," I declared, my scales glittering with anticipation. "A space battle simulation. You and me. If you win, you get full admission to the Academy and a special commendation. If I win," I paused dramatically, "you leave and never return." "Done," Marcus said before I could even finish speaking. "These humans and their quick decisions. Don't they ever stop to calculate probabilities?" The Grand Observatory transformed into our arena. 2 simulation pods facing each other like ancient duelists. My latest model quantum enhancement chamber versus his grandfather's modified antique. This simulation, I announced to the packed crowd, will recreate the legendary Battle of the Crimson Nebula, but with a twist I couldn't help grinning. We'll each command a fleet, but with opposite tactical advantages. The human will have superior numbers, while I will have advanced technology. Marcus nodded, seeming completely unfazed by the fact that he'd be controlling outdated ships against my quantum-enhanced fleet. "Ready to lose, young human?" I asked, as we prepared to enter our respective pods. "Ready to have fun, Professor," he replied with a wink. A wink. The audacity. The simulation began. My quantum fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, each ship a masterpiece of Confederate engineering. Marcus's larger fleet of outdated vessels appeared to be in complete chaos. "What is he doing?" Junior Administrator Quicks wondered aloud, their spots showing total confusion. Instead of forming standard combat patterns, Marcus's ships were dancing? Yes, dancing. They moved in seemingly random patterns, weaving in and out of the nebula's crimson clouds like a swarm of intoxicated space insects. I launched my first attack, a perfectly calculated quantum barrage that should have decimated his disorganized fleet. But somehow, his ships weren't where they were supposed to be when my attacks arrived. "Quantum probability calculations failing," I heard one of the technicians shout. "His movement patterns don't follow any known tactical protocols." That's when Marcus sprung his trap. His chaotic dance had actually been positioning his ships in a 3-dimensional pattern that our 12-dimensional sensors completely missed. While we were busy calculating quantum probabilities, his fleet had surrounded us in normal space. "But that's not possible," I screamed as his outdated ships began launching synchronized attacks from all directions. The statistical probability of success for such primitive tactics is infinitesimal. "Good thing humans are bad at math," Marcus's voice crackled through the comm system, followed by what humans call laughter. What happened next became known as the Phoenix Gambit in Academy textbooks. Marcus used the nebula's natural phenomena, which our advanced sensors typically filtered out as irrelevant, to mask his ship's movements. He turned our technological superiority against us, using our own complex calculations as a predictable pattern he could exploit. "He's not fighting our technology," Admiral Stormchaser announced proudly. "He's fighting our assumptions." One by one, my quantum-enhanced ships fell to what should have been inferior tactics. But with each loss, I began to understand. We had become so reliant on our advanced technology that we'd forgotten the basic joy of flying. While I was processing 12-dimensional battle calculations, Marcus was simply flying by the seat of his pants, a bizarre human expression I later learned. The final moment came when my flagship found itself surrounded by a spiral of Marcus's ships, closing in like the coils of a Venusian serpent. "Checkmate," Marcus announced, another primitive human reference I didn't understand at the time. The simulation ended. The grand observatory erupted in cheers. Even the quantum-shifted Voidborn were expressing excitement, their probability fields fluctuating wildly. I emerged from my pod, my scales slightly pale from the experience, to find Marcus already out and bouncing on his toes. "How do humans maintain such energy?" "That was awesome," he exclaimed. "Did you see that nebula drift maneuver? I totally made that up on the spot." And that's when it hit me. While we had been treating spaceflight as a science to be mastered, humans treated it as an art to be explored. Their very limitations had become their greatest strength. I straightened myself to my full height, my antennae glowing with what I hope was dignity, and addressed the crowd. "The Galactic Academy of Flight," I declared, "has found its newest student." The cheers that followed could be heard all the way to the lower atmosphere. Marcus Phoenix, the 14-year-old human boy, had done the impossible. He had beaten not just our trials, but our prejudices. And so, dear members of the Galactic Historical Society, that brings us to the aftermath of what we now call the Phoenix Revolution. Yes, they named it after him. Humans do love their dramatic titles, don't they? The changes that followed were, well, explosive would be an understatement. By the end of that same cycle, we had 73 human applications sitting on my desk. 73. My antennae nearly fell off from the shock. But Professor Junior Administrator Quicks asked during one of our morning meetings, their spots showing genuine curiosity, how will we adapt our training programs? I looked up from Marcus's latest test scores, which had broken another 16 Academy records, and laughed. "Adapt? My dear Quicks, we're not going to adapt anything. We're going to start over." And start over we did. Marcus Phoenix didn't just change our admission policies, he changed our entire understanding of what makes a great pilot. We began incorporating human gaming systems into our training programs. Can you believe it? 10,000 cycles of tradition, and now we have students playing something called Space Invaders. "The humans are teaching us now," Professor Lumina Brightscale often remarks, her crystalline form vibrating with amusement. Who would have thought? Marcus graduated top of his class, obviously. But here's the real kicker. Remember those 73 human applicants? Every single one who passed the basic aptitude tests graduated in the top 10% of their respective classes. Every single one. The Confederacy took notice. How could they not? Within 5 cycles, human pilots were being recruited for everything from deep space exploration to quantum courier services. Their unorthodox approaches to navigation and combat revolutionized Confederate flight doctrine. They don't just think outside the box, Admiral Stormchaser loves to say at graduation ceremonies. They don't even see the box. Oh, and speaking of ceremonies, you should have seen the look on Supreme Pilot Nix's Voidweaver's face when they had to present Marcus with the golden wings of excellence. Their tentacles were tied in knots trying to pin the medal on his primitive cloth uniform. But my favorite part? The new wing we built specifically for human students. We called it the Phoenix Wing, obviously. It comes complete with gravity simulation, atmospheric processors, and yes, a full arcade of those primitive gaming machines. Who knew that Space Invaders would become required coursework at the galaxy's most prestigious flight academy? Marcus Phoenix himself. Last I heard, he was leading an experimental flight program, teaching mixed-species squadrons how to combine Confederate technology with human instincts. They're calling it the Hybrid Flight Initiative. The future of spaceflight, he told me during his last visit, isn't about choosing between human instinct and alien tech. It's about bringing them together. And you know what? He was right. Again. How annoying. So here I am, Professor Xylax Brighteye, former champion of tradition, now teaching a course called Human Gaming Theory and its applications in quantum navigation. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? To any humans listening to this historical record, I have only this to say: thank you. Thank you for showing us that sometimes the best way forward is to stop calculating and just fly. And to Marcus Phoenix, wherever you are in this vast galaxy, zipping around in that modified ship of yours, breaking records and defying physics, I admit it. You were right. We were wrong. And our academy is better for it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a high score to beat on something called asteroids. For research purposes, of course.